what this woman is saying is that her students obey her more by the end of this course. She's brainwashing people. This is effed up. And this, of course, is exactly what the New York Times wants for all of us. They want to brainwash everyone. The New York Times tells people not to think.
Mr. Reagan.
The New York Times published an opinion piece that was so absurd, that was so dystopian, that was so shockingly disrespectful to the readers and to the American people in general, that I did not think that it could possibly be real. I thought maybe this is some kind of Babylon Bee satire. In fact, I posted about this on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, and in that post I wrote, I did not think that this could possibly be real, so I looked it up. This is totally real. Yeah, because I went to the New York Times website and I looked for this article specifically, and there it was. I couldn't believe it. The headline reads, "Don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, isn't helping in the fight against disinformation." Don't think about important issues, guys. Don't think about things. Just listen to us. Listen to the New York Times. Just believe everything that we say uncritically. Don't go looking for another source. We're the only source that you need. And you know what? I'm afraid a lot of the readers of the New York Times already do this. And I suspect that they will read this insane, dystopian, Orwellian 1984 style insanity, and the whole time they're just going to be nodding their heads in agreement. And I think that a lot of people who read this article, they're going to do exactly what it says. And so what exactly does it say? Well, I'm going to read it to you in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. Have you heard about data brokers? Basically, these are companies that sell your data. In November, Duke University conducted a study in which they set up a .asia domain and an email address, and they contacted hundreds of data brokers and offered to buy the data specifically of US military personnel and their families. These brokers accepted. These brokers sold the names, home addresses, phone numbers, marital status, homeowner status, estimated home values, charitable donations, and more of 10,000 servicemen for as little as 12 cents per record. They also offered medical conditions, finances, credit scores, as well as other sensitive information along with detailed geolocation data. Geolocation presents huge risks. Foreign actors can use this data to track military or political targets and potentially compromise these targets. Active duty military, veterans, and their families are all at risk for profiling, blackmail, targeting with propaganda, and more. And it's not just military, they're targeting all of us. We are under attack. Aura is an all-in-one digital safety tool that can identify these data brokers exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf. Brokers are legally required to remove your information if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do this. Let Aura handle it for you. Aura also does much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you can't see. Aura also offers credit and identity monitoring, antivirus, VPN, password management, comprehensive parental controls, and more. Aura is a US-based company with 100% US-based customer support staff that's available 24/7. You get everything at one affordable price, and the peace of mind of knowing that these plans include $1 million of identity theft insurance for each adult, up to 5 adults in a family plan. So go to aura.com/Mr. Reagan and get your first 14 days for free. This is a product that I trust. All right, so this is Don't Go Down the Rabbit Hole, an opinion article by Charlie Warzel. For an academic, Michael Caulfield has an odd request. Stop overthinking what you see online. That's kind of a mischaracterization. He should have written, stop thinking about what you see online. Mr. Caulfield, a digital literacy expert at Washington State University, Vancouver. Vancouver in Washington, by the way, isn't really in Washington. I mean, it is technically in Washington State, but it's actually part of Portland. So we're talking about Portland here, Portland, Oregon, sadly where I'm from, where all the lunatics have invaded. Everybody thinks Portland is this place that somehow spawns evil leftists. No. They have taken over. When I was a kid, it was not like that. Mr. Caulfield knows all too well that at this very moment, more people are fighting for the opportunity to lie to you than perhaps any other point in human history, including, yeah, that's right, the New York Times. Misinformation rides the greased algorithmic rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities and in volumes that make it nearly impossible to stop. That alone makes information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. But Mr. Caulfield argues that the deck is stacked even further against us. that the way we're taught from a young age to evaluate and think critically about information is fundamentally flawed and out of step with the chaos of the current internet. You've been taught to think for yourself and check different sources. You shouldn't be doing that. Just obey. All right, now after my fictional quote, here's the real quote. He says, we're taught that in order to protect ourselves from bad information, we need to deeply engage with the stuff that washes up in front of us, Mr. Caulfield told me recently. It's kind of funny because the real quote isn't that far off from my jokingly fake quote. He suggested that the dominant mode of media literacy, if kids get taught any at all, is that you'll get imperfect information, then use reasoning to fix that somehow. But in reality, that strategy can completely backfire. It's not fix that somehow. That's not what we're taught, you idiot. We're not taught you may get imperfect information, but then you should use reasoning to fix that somehow. This is like an infomercial where there's absolutely no problem that they're fixing with the product that they're trying to provide, but they create a problem.
Does the shoulder strap of your car cut into your shoulder? Is your shoulder strap too tight and annoying? Introducing the Teddy Bear, the cute little guy that eliminates all those problems.
That's what this guy's doing here. He's saying that we've been taught to read imperfect information and then use reasoning to fix that somehow. And that's somehow a problem that he's now going to address. No, Caulfield, that's not what we're taught to do. What we're taught to do is to read information, which is always going to be imperfect, whether it's from the New York Times or from Alex Jones or whoever it's from, it's always going to be imperfect. And we use reasoning to dismiss ideas that don't make sense or seem fishy or suspicious, and to accept ideas that do make sense, or at least to consider them as likely or probable. And people need to develop this skill. People need to develop this skill more now than ever because of the internet. We need to teach kids to read everything they can and be discerning with their ability to determine which stuff is good and which stuff is crap. That's what we have to do. And this guy's saying that that is a terrible idea. It can completely backfire, is what he said specifically. All right. In other words, resist the lure of rabbit holes, in part by reimagining media literacy for the internet hellscape we occupy. It's often counterproductive to engage directly with content from an unknown source, and people can be led astray by false information. He's saying, don't read stuff that isn't true. Fair enough, but you don't know it's not true until you read it, right? Influenced by the research of Sam Weinberg, a professor at Stanford, and Sarah McGrew, an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, Mr. Caulfield argued that the best way to learn about a source of information is to leave it and look elsewhere, a concept called lateral reading. Ooh, fascinating. For instance, imagine you were to visit Stormfront, a white supremacist message board, and try to understand racist claims in order to debunk them. Even if you see through the horrible rhetoric, at the end of the day, you gave that place however many minutes of your time, Mr. Caulfield said. Even with good intentions, you run the risk of misunderstanding something, because Stormfront users are way better at propaganda than you. You won't get less racist reading Stormfront critically, but you might be overloaded by information and overwhelmed. This article and this guy, this complete idiot, Caulfield, totally assumes that every American is a moron. Like there's absolutely no ability to read Stormfront. I don't know what he thinks is on Stormfront. I think it's mostly forums. But you go through Stormfront and you read some of the stuff that people are saying, and you can't possibly disagree with it. You're going to be overloaded by information and overwhelmed, and therefore you have no ability to think critically about it. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard. You're not going to get less racist. Nobody needs to get less racist. If you're not racist, you don't have to get less racist. You just stay not racist. God, this is some of the dumbest stuff I've ever read in my life. Stormfront users are way better at propaganda than you. Really? Are they so good? If they're so good at propaganda, why isn't America all racist? I know, okay, fine. I know leftists all think America's racist, but we're not, okay? Stormfront is like a very small percentage of the population, those people. And by the way, I've gone on Stormfront to see what they think about Donald Trump, right? Because everybody's like, oh, the white supremacists, they love Donald Trump. They just love him. There's all these dog whistles that Donald Trump is using for the people, for the white supremacists. So I went on Stormfront, I checked it out, and they're not hugely fond of Donald Trump. They don't care really all that much about Donald Trump. And they didn't even really say much about black people. They were mostly complaining about Jewish people, which I was actually quite shocked by. But anyway, I digress. I'll keep reading here. Our current information crisis, Mr. Caulfield argues, is an attention crisis. The goal of disinformation is to capture attention, and critical thinking is deep attention. No, that's not true. The goal of disinformation is what? Disinformation is lying, right? The goal of disinformation is not to capture attention. The goal of lying is not to capture attention. The goal of disinformation is to mislead people, right? Is to convince people that something is true when it's not actually true. That's what lies are. That's what disinformation is. What the hell is he talking about? He's trying to frame this in a way that makes sense for his stupid idea, but it's just wrong. The goal of disinformation is not to capture attention. And critical thinking is deep attention. That is true. Oftentimes you do have to pay close attention to something in order to think about it critically. But that's a good thing. Anyway, apparently he wrote that in 2018, not that I care. People learn to think critically by focusing on something and contemplating it deeply, to follow the information's logic and the inconsistencies. Yes, that's what people should be doing more of in the world. That natural human mindset is a liability in an attention economy. It allows grifters, conspiracy theorists, trolls, and savvy attention hackers to take advantage of us and steal our focus. Whenever you give attention to a bad actor, you allow them to steal your attention from better treatments of an issue and give them the opportunity to warp your perspective, Mr. Caulfield said. Okay, but how do you know they're a bad actor until you read what they have to say? It's only when you read, analyze, and think critically about what they're saying can you recognize if they're a bad actor or not. This is the dumbest thing that I've ever read. Okay, let's keep reading. Oh, he even looks like a complete loser. Look at that guy. Whatever. All right. One way to combat this dynamic is to change how we teach media literacy. Internet users need to learn that our attention is a scarce commodity and it is to be spent wisely. All right. In 2016, Mr. Caulfield met with Mr. Weinberg, who suggested modeling the process after the way professional fact-checkers assess information. Mr. Caulfield refined the practice into 4 simple principles. Stop. Investigate the source. This should be a public service announcement. Stop. Investigate the source. Find better coverage. Trace claims, quotes, and media to the original context. Otherwise known as SIFT. What a dork. Mr. Caulfield walked me through the process using an Instagram post from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent anti-vaccine activist, falsely alleging a link between the human papillomavirus vaccine and cancer. If this is not a claim where I have a depth of understanding, then I want to stop for a second and before going further, just investigate the source, Mr. Caulfield said. He copied Mr. Kennedy's name on the Instagram post and popped it into Google. Look how fast this is, he told me as he counted the seconds out loud. In 15 seconds, he navigated to Wikipedia and scrolled through the introductory section of the page, highlighting with his cursor the last sentence, which reads that Mr. Kennedy is an anti-vaccine activist and a conspiracy theorist. Oh, somebody on Wikipedia wrote that Robert Kennedy is a conspiracy theorist. Therefore, we should just stop reading this now. Stop reading this post now. I read half of it. Okay, I can't keep looking. I must not expose myself to these crazy conspiracy theorist ideas. Look, I actually do this sometimes. Sometimes if I'm in the middle of an article, sometimes after I reach the end of the article. It just depends on, when it occurs to me. Maybe I should check this source out. But this guy wants you to stop even before you know anything about what they're posting. He's trying to teach people to channel the flow of information themselves. They're like censoring information from themselves. He's trying to get people to practice aggressive ignorance. It's like, I don't want to know anything except for what approved sources tell me. I want to know what CNN is telling me because I believe CNN 100%. I want to know what New York Times is telling me because I believe New York Times 100%. I don't want to read the Wall Street Journal because they printed stuff that I believe in the past maybe wasn't that accurate. Well, New York Times post things all the time that are not accurate. CNN all the time. MSNBC, pretty much nonstop lies. But they're not going to talk about those sources being wrong ever because, that these are leftist organizations. They want people to believe the vetted sources. Nobody calls the New York Times a newspaper that traffics in conspiracy theories. But they do sometimes. I mean, they said that Donald Trump there was evidence of Russian collusion. Well, there was no evidence of that. They were trafficking in conspiracy theories. Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, all these people did that. But you'll never see on their Wikipedia pages, they're a known conspiracy theorist. But Adam Schiff is a known conspiracy theorist, but it's not going to be on his Wikipedia page. Why? Because Wikipedia is left-wing. What a terrible site to suggest that people look and see if somebody's a conspiracy theorist. This is very obviously a way to channel people away from conservative ideas and toward leftist propaganda. He goes on and he says, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. the best unbiased source on information about a vaccine? I'd argue no. And that's good enough to know that we should probably just move on, he said. Don't expose yourself to that. No, 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 no. Here's the other issue with this. Okay, let's say this is somebody that I don't agree with, like Keith Olbermann or somebody like that, Rachel Maddow. Should I listen to half of a sentence of what Rachel Maddow has to say and then stop and say, okay, time to move on, I know better? No, of course not. I want to listen to every single thing that she has to say. Why? Because if I'm confronted with an opposing point of view, somebody who agrees with Rachel Maddow, I want to already have been exposed to those ideas. I want to know what Rachel Maddow thinks so that I can then challenge those ideas and I can have an intelligent conversation. I actually had this experience once with a leftist on an airplane. I was sitting on an airplane with this girl, and she brought up the concept of the wage gap. She was a leftist. She was a pretty radical leftist. So I explained to her that actually women out of college who are not married and do not have kids and who are in their 20s, they actually make more money than men in their 20s out of college. They actually make more money than men. Now, she had never heard this fact before. And I, of course, gave her several other facts, but that was the one that really drove her over the edge. That drove her nuts, because she was just like, that's just not true. That's just not true. And I'm like, but it is true, actually. They've checked this out. This is actually accurate. You can look it up. And she just never had heard it before. Now, if she had maybe watched Ben Shapiro, or she'd seen Tucker Carlson, or she'd read the Wall Street Journal or anything, done her research on this, checked out what the other side had to say, she would have been prepared for that fact. And I left out part of it, and not intentionally, but I had forgotten about it, which was that this was true specifically of women in major metropolitan areas, so big cities. And so if she had heard that fact before, or she'd read articles about this, she could then come back with, oh no, but that was only women in big cities. Big cities tend to be left-leaning, and therefore it biases the result. Left-leaning people are more likely to favor women over men, and therefore blah, 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 whatever. She could have made a point. It's not a particularly good point, because where else are women going to work, right? Women tend to sacrifice money for lots of things, right? That's one of the other arguments that I made to her, is like, they'll sacrifice a bigger salary for convenience. They'll sacrifice a bigger salary for comfort. They'll sacrifice a bigger salary for safety. You don't see a lot of women on those fishing boats in Alaska, right? But it's true. In the major metropolitan areas is where these studies were done. And this woman could have made that point, and she wouldn't have felt so attacked. She wouldn't have felt so shocked. She wouldn't have felt so unstable and off balance and unable to make a counterpoint to me had she heard that information before, but she hadn't. And I wasn't trying to put the smackdown on this woman and absolutely obliterate her, but that's exactly what happened. But it wasn't because I was intending to do it. It was because she has just not done her research. She just hadn't heard the other side of the argument before, so she wasn't prepared to hear those arguments. And this guy is advising people to not prepare themselves for the other side of the argument. Just don't read anything that somebody might argue to you in the future that you might not be prepared to respond to. Just don't even look at it. Just don't even think about it. It seems to me like he's creating an entire population of people who cannot properly debate ideas. This is the dumbest thing I've ever read. Okay, hold on. He probed deeper into the method to find better coverage by copying the main claim in Mr. Kennedy's post and pasting that into a Google search. Oh, Google, that's good. Okay, so first we're using Wikipedia, the very, very left-wing Wikipedia, and now we're going to Google, which is probably the most left-wing company on the planet, who curates their searches specifically to sideline any kind of conservative thought or ideas and promote leftist ideas. So now we're going to do a Google search. Okay, let's check this out. The first two results came from Agency Française Presse, fact check website, and the National Institutes of Health. His quick searches showed a pattern. Mr. Kennedy's claims were outside the consensus, a sign they were motivated by something other than science. The SIFT method and the instructional teaching unit, about 6 hours of classwork. 6 hours of classwork? You have to spend 6 hours learning how to not read things? That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Okay. That accompanies it has been picked up by dozens of universities across the country and in some Canadian high schools. Oh, Canada. That is very sad. Okay. What is potentially revolutionary about SIFT is that it focuses on making quick judgments. A SIFT fact check can and should take 30 to 60 to 90 seconds to evaluate a piece of content. Okay. The fact that they're teaching this to students, that to me, that's the worst part of this, because you're gonna bring about an entire generation of people who literally cannot think for themselves. They're just completely funneled to very specific sources, and they're being taught to ignore sources that they perceive as untrustworthy, but might not actually be untrustworthy. But they're told is untrustworthy by Wikipedia or Google, and so they're like, oh, this is untrustworthy, I better not listen to it, because Google and Wikipedia told me to. And 90 seconds to evaluate a piece of content? If you get a meme, it takes you, this is how long it takes you to ingest the information in a meme. That's it. I'm gonna spend 60 seconds, I'm gonna spend 90 seconds, a minute and a half looking up the source of this meme so that I can be sure that this is okay for me to do. Like, come on, man. Don't be ridiculous. I mean, if it's an article, okay, yeah, sure, but come on, not a tweet. The 4 steps are based on the premise that you often make better decisions with less information than you do with more. These people are insane. Also, spending 15 minutes to determine a single fact in order to decipher a tweet or a piece of news coming from a source you've never seen before will often leave you more confused than you were before. What the hell? Okay, he's talking about really dumb people. He's assuming every American is really dumb. This is what I'm saying. It's very, very disrespectful, this article. I cannot believe New York Times published this. This is just garbage. The question we want students asking is this a good source for this purpose, or could I find something better relatively quickly? Oh my God. Whatever you do, don't read Breitbart, only read New York Times. Mr. Caulfield said, I've seen it in the classroom where a student finds a great answer to it in 3 minutes, but then keeps going and ends up won over by bad information. Okay. I think what he actually means here is that he's seen situations where a student has found the leftist answer to a question, and then he keeps going, and then he finds a conservative idea, and he's won over by that argument, and the teacher says, no. That's bad information. We need to stick to the good information, which is the leftist ideas. The author of the article goes on, says, SIFT has its limits. It's designed for casual news consumers, not experts who or those attempting to do deep research. A reporter working on an investigative story or trying to synthesize complex information will have to go deep. But for somebody just trying to figure out the basic fact, it's helpful not to get bogged down. Don't strain yourself by thinking too hard, plebes. Don't trouble yourself with a variety of opinions or various sources of information. Just trust us. Just read the sources we tell you to read. Okay, again, I gave a fake quote. Here's the real quote. We've been trained to think that Googling or just checking one resource we trust is almost like cheating, he said. But when people search Google, the best results may not always be first, but the good information is usually near the top. What? Yes, okay, of course he's going to think that because he's a leftist. Google is a left-wing company, and they curate data. They put all the leftist crap on the top, and they put all the conservative stuff like 10 pages deep. That's why this guy's saying this. He's like, no, just do a cursory search. Don't dig into ideas too much. You might find the truth. No, just stay on the surface level, accept the lies, and move on. He goes on, he says, often you see a pattern in the links of a consensus that's been formed, but deeper into the process, it often gets weirder. By weirder, he means more conservative. It's important to know when to stop. Again, my fake quote is almost identical to the real quote. These people are so predictable. That is astonishing to me. That is astonishing to me. Don't do a deep dive investigation into anything because you might find a conservative idea that you like better than the leftist bull crap that they're trying to feed you. This is a shocking article. I mean, they often will tell leftists certain things that are kind of try to subtly influence them to I think, be stupid and to believe lies. This is so blatant. This is such blatant propaganda to try to dumb down their own audience and just make them complacent. Don't think for yourself. Just believe what we tell you. This is the dystopian nightmare. They just want a society of automaton drones that just do exactly what they say. This is like Soviet propaganda. Don't step out of line. Stay in line. Do what we tell you. This is sick, twisted stuff. Christina Laudum, an assistant political science professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, has seen the damage firsthand. The damage. While teaching an introductory class as a PhD student in 2015, she noticed her students had trouble vetting sources and distinguishing credible news from untrustworthy information. Credible news is almost for sure left-wing news, and untrustworthy information is almost certainly code for conservative news. During one research assignment in the 2016 presidential race, of course, multiple students cited a debunked claim from a satirical website claiming that Ben Carson, a candidate that year, had been endorsed by the Ku Klux Klan, which is hilarious, by the way. Okay, now they've quoted her. She says, some of these students had never had somebody even talk to them about checking sources or looking for fake news, she told me. It was just uncritical acceptance of it, fit with the narrative in their head, or complete rejection if it didn't. Okay, wow. So these students are almost all leftists, for sure, okay? And they probably all just accepted this idea that the Ku Klux Klan, I can't even pronounce them, the Ku Klux Klan endorsed Ben Carson because Ben Carson is a conservative. And leftists think that the conservatives are all racist. So, of course, the Ku Klux Klan is going to endorse a conservative, even if he's black like Ben Carson. Okay, so yeah, you have these dumb students who don't know how to think critically because they're leftists and they're biased. And here's the thing. This is not the first time the left has discouraged people from thinking too much, right? They've been doing this for years, decades, really. This is just the most obvious example of this. So you've got all these leftist students who have been taught not to think too critically about anything, just to accept whatever the New York Times tells them or whatever. Then they read this bit of information, which is obviously nonsense, which any Republican would look at and laugh at. It's from a satirical website. And they just believe it because it's the kind of thing that they want to believe, because they're leftists and they don't know how to think critically. What's ironic here is that she cites an example of something that is likely to occur if people follow this method of research, just believing basically what credible news sources tell them. This is exactly what happened with the Russian collusion thing. Leftists just believed it uncritically. They did not think for themselves because, well, CNN wouldn't lie to me. Yeah, they would. Miss Latham started teaching a SIFT-based media literacy unit in her political science classes because of this method's practical application. The unit is short, only 2 weeks long. 2 weeks long! 2 weeks long to tell kids halfway through any sentence that you read in any article or tweet or meme or anything, stop and check out the source. That's 2 weeks takes that? Jeez, okay. Her students latched on to quick tricks like how to hover over a Twitter handle to see if the account looks legitimate or is a parody account or an impersonation. Yeah, okay, I will accept that that's good advice, but I'm pretty sure everybody does that already. Well, okay, maybe not. I do it. They learned to reverse image search using Google to check if a photo had been doctored or if similar photos had been published by trusted news outlets. That's actually kind of an advanced thing. I wouldn't think that would be like a quick fact check or a quick source check. That's like more like something I would do or a reporter would do. But to be honest, that's actually a pretty good bit of advice. And you see, that is an example of me having a discerning view of what I'm reading. I am thinking critically about this article. Of course, most of it I'm speaking about derisively because it's idiotic. But the idea that you can reverse image search using Google to check to see if an image has been doctored, I actually think that's very good advice, right? And I recognize that it was good advice, and I'm saying that it's good advice. So I'm not sitting here and I'm saying every single thing in this, that they're talking about here is a bad idea. I think checking sources is actually a great idea. I just don't like that they're telling students to do this before they've actually read the content, And I think that checking these photos is a great idea. So, this is discernment. This is what people should be doing when they're checking information. You shouldn't tell them to limit the information they're getting. You should just teach them to do what I'm doing right now and to analyze the information and say some of it's good, some of it's bad. I'll take the good and I'll throw out the bad. It's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. They just don't have any faith in humanity. All right, let's keep reading here. Students were taught to identify claims in Facebook or Instagram posts and within a few searches decide, even if they're unsure about the veracity, whether the account seemed to be a trustworthy guide or if they should look elsewhere. Again, they're focused so much on the source of the material that they're not paying attention to the material itself. If you read an article or a meme or a tweet or something that is ridiculous and stupid, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that the source is a bad source. It just means that, okay, they made a mistake maybe, or they said something stupid, they had the wrong point of view. Listen, most conservatives who I agree with on almost everything will have at some point or another said something that I will disagree with. These guys want to say, if there's any sign whatsoever, if anybody has made the claim anywhere on the internet that somebody is a conspiracy theorist, you have to dismiss everything that they say. That is insane. And like I said before, you're never going to see the New York Times or CNN or MSNBC described as a conspiracy theory website or news network or whatever, even though they totally traffic in conspiracy theories all the flippin' time. Just most of them are about conservatives and Donald Trump, so people don't call them conspiracy theories. But they are. We just generally call them lies. The goal isn't to make political judgments or talk students out of a particular point of view, but to try to get them to understand the context of a source of information and make decisions about its credibility. The course is not precious about overly academic sources either. Wait, what the hell? What? The goal is not to make political judgments or talk students out of a particular point of view. That's exactly what it is, because you're telling them to use only leftist sources. That's the entire goal of this. It's obviously shrouded in this haze of this illusion that they're just trying to find credible sources. But we all know what they mean by that. They mean leftist sources. So this is a lie. They're lying to students, essentially. The students are confused when I tell them to try and trace something down with a quick Wikipedia search because they've been told not to do so, she says, not for research papers. But if you're trying to find out if a site is legitimate or if somebody has a history as a conspiracy theorist and you show them how to follow the page's citations, it's quick and effective, which means it's more likely to be used. We think that Wikipedia is totally unreliable. Don't use it for anything except to find out if a conservative is a conspiracy theorist. If it's a conspiracy theorist, it's always right. Believe it. As a journalist who can be a bit of a snob about research methods, it makes me anxious to type this advice. Use Wikipedia for quick guidance. Spend less time torturing yourself with complex primary sources. A part of my brain hears this and reflexively worries these methods could be exploited by conspiracy theorists. But listening to Miss Latham and Mr. Caulfield describe disinformation dynamics, it seems like snobs like me have it backwards. Okay, I just hate this guy. Think about YouTube conspiracy theorists or many QAnon or anti-vax influencers. Their tactic, as Mr. Caulfield noted, is to flatter viewers while overwhelming them with 3-hour videos laced with debunked claims and pseudoscience, as well as legitimate information. The internet offers this illusion of explanatory depth, he said. Until 20 seconds ago, you'd never thought about, say, race and IQ. But now, suddenly, somebody's treating you like an expert. It's flattering your intellect. And so you engage, but you don't really stand a chance. This is exactly what every newspaper does. This is exactly what CNN does. This is exactly what MSNBC does. What the hell is he talking about? People watch the news a lot of times to feel smart. They just do. I don't think they watch YouTube videos to feel smart. I think they watch YouTube videos to see, is there any truths that the mainstream media isn't telling us? And then they use their discernment to decide whether it's true or not. Some people aren't very good at that. Some people are really good at that. But everybody should be trying to be better at that. They shouldn't just ignore sources that you say aren't good or that Google says aren't good or that Wikipedia says aren't good, flattering your intellect. That's what reading the New York Times does. What he described is a kind of informational hubris we have that is quite difficult to fight. But what SIFT and Mr. Caulfield's lessons seem to do is flatter their students in a different way by reminding us our attention is precious. Don't waste it on the information that I don't want you to hear. Only give your attention to the New York Times. The goal of SIFT isn't to be the arbiter of truth, yes it is, but to instill a reflex that asks if something is worth one's time and attention and to turn away if not. Just don't look at it. It has leprosy. It's a leper. Because the method is less interested in political judgments, Mr. Caulfield and Ms. Latham noticed students across the political spectrum are more likely to embrace it. Wow, that is a massive lie. They're just lying. They're just lying to people. That's absolutely disgusting. And the problem is, I think this actually probably works. They actually probably convince some moderate to conservative students that they shouldn't do deep dive research into stuff. They should just do cursory searches and accept that stuff as true, even though all that stuff is curated by Wikipedia and Google. It's very, very left-wing organizations curating that information. So just read the leftist stuff. Don't read conservative stuff. Unbelievable. This is such a scam. By the end of the 2-week course, Ms. Latham said, students are better at finding primary sources for research papers. I thought you just said Wikipedia shouldn't be used for okay, whatever, anyway. In discussions, they're less likely to fall back on motivated reasoning. I don't really understand what that means, but okay. Students tend to be less defensive when confronted with a piece of information they disagree with. Even if their opinions, you know what? Because she's making them more left-wing. And she's also making them think that they're wrong about things that they're not wrong about. If you take a conservative and you trick them into saying the only valuable source of information are these left-wing sources, and that conservative foolishly believes you, and they read all these left-wing sources, they go, oh man, I must be wrong about all this stuff, then yeah, you're going to make them more compliant. What this woman is saying is that her students obey her more by the end of this course. She's brainwashing people. This is effed up. And this, of course, is exactly what the New York Times wants for all of us. They want to brainwash everyone. Even if their opinions on a broader issue don't change, a window is open that makes conversation possible. I'm able to convince them of my radical leftist views because of this program. Frick, man, this is manipulation, propaganda, brainwashing, gaslighting. This is actually pretty smart, I gotta say. For as far as sinister, villainous things go, this is a pretty good one. Very, very clever, evil people. Perhaps most promising, she has seen her students share the methods with family members who post dubious news stories online. It sounds so simple, but I think that teaching people how to check their news source by even a quick Wikipedia can have profound effects, she said. What an absolute bitch. I hate these people. SIFT is not an antidote to misinformation. It certainly is not. Poor media literacy is just one component of a broader problem that includes more culpable actors like politicians, platforms, and conspiracy peddlers. If powerful, influential people with the ability to command vast quantities of attention use that power to warp reality, and platforms don't intervene, no mnemonic device can stop them. Okay, right there, that guy's literally talking about Donald Trump convincing people of various ideas, and Twitter, now X, not intervening. It's exactly what he's talking about. But SIFT may add a bit of friction into the system. Most importantly, it urges us to take the attention we save with SIFT and apply it to issues that matter to us. Yeah, that's what you're doing. You're rescuing us from wasting our attention. That's what you're doing. Right now, we are taking the scariest, most vulnerable resource we have, our attention, and we're using it to try to repair the horribly broken information ecosystem, Mr. Caulfield said. We're throwing good money after bad. Our focus isn't free, and yet we're giving it away with every glance at a screen. But it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, here we go with the infomercial pitch again. But it doesn't have to be that way. And if you act now, we'll throw in 2 SIFTs for free.
Mention this commercial and we'll give you a second teddy bear absolutely free. That's 2 cuddly teddy bears for the low, low price of just $14.95.
In fact, the economics are in our favor. Demand for our attention is at an all-time high, and we control supply. It's time we increased our price. This is the stupidest thing. All right, anyway, that's it. That's the damn thing. You've heard what I have to say about all this. Now I want to know what you have to say. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Remember to buy all of my overpriced crap on Teespring, or send me a super thanks, or send me a donation on Patreon. All right, until next time, remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant, it's just they know so much. That is not so. Good night.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man.